Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of 30 Albums for 30 Years, 1964 till 1994, where we take a look and a listen to the most impactful albums between 1964 and 1994. And we do it chronologically by release date. So the plan is 30 albums per year for 30 years. That's a lot of albums, so let's see if I can make it that far. And I am your host, Jay Sweet. Welcome. In today's podcast, we will be checking out the album Stan Getz and Joao Gilberto's Getz and Gilberto. Alright, cats, so let's get into it. Stan Getz and Joao Gilberto, featuring Antônio Carlos Jobim, Getz and Giberto. Verve Records, released March of 1964, recorded a year earlier, March 18th and 19th of 1963. So, although it was waning quickly, jazz was still commercially viable in the first half of the 1960s. And by 1964, jazz was splintered into many subgenres, including free jazz, hard bop, and cool jazz, which mixed classical elements. Now, some jazz fans found these forms either too aggressive, too experimental, or too classically oriented. One subgenre that became popular during the decade's first half was Bossa Nova, which incorporated a blend of soft and palatable Brazilian music with jazz elements. Okay, so let's learn a little bit about some of the musicians on the record. Now, the Bossa Nova style became associated with three key figures. The first is Stan Getz. Stan Getz was a famous American tenor saxophonist with a beautiful, sultry sound, influenced by swing master Lester Young. Now, before performing Bossa Novas, Getz had worked in the modernistic bands of Stan Kenton and Woody Herman, these are big bands, and small group jazz sessions with some of the greatest jazz masters. By teaming up with acoustic guitarist Charlie Byrd, he helped to inspire Bossa Nova on the famous recording Jazz Samba from 1962 on MGM Verve Records. The next major figure included on the record is Brazilian guitarist João Gilberto. He is often referred to as the father of Bossa Nova. His recordings throughout the 1950s helped to blend traditional samba music with jazz. Giberto's most important collaborator and the most celebrated composer of Bossa Nova was pianist and guitarist Antônio Carlos Jobim. That's our third major figure on this record. Many of Jobim's songs included advanced jazz harmonies blended with gorgeous melodies. Jobim is often credited as one of the most impactful composers of the 20th century. So the combination of Getz, Giberto, and Jobim worked tremendously, and the album Getz and Giberto was well received, particularly for a jazz record in 1964. It sold over 500,000 copies. That's a gold record. Kind of amazing, given the musical landscape at the time. And in 1965, the album won several Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, Best Jazz Instrumental Album, and Best Engineered Record. The Album of the Year award marked the first time in which a jazz record won such an honor, and the first time a non-American album won the award as well. Also included on the album was Astrid Gilberto, that's Joao's wife at the time, who had never sang professionally before, and yet she makes her debut on this record. Bassist Sebastiano Neto and Milton Banana playing drums and percussion. Simply put, Getz and Gilberto is one of the most relaxing and brilliantly nuanced records ever made. If you're of age, you might want to grab a nice glass of wine with this one, turn the lights down low, and let's enjoy Getz and Gilberto. Alright, so now it's time to drop the needle on track 1, side 1, and the piece is The Girl from Ipanema, which was a huge hit and is the most recognizable bossa nova piece ever written. I get asked to play this song probably about once a weekend. It's still very popular. Now, Jobim wrote this music as early as 1962, and the recording of the piece marked the debut of Astrid Gilberto, Joao's wife at the time, as a vocalist. The choice to allow her to sing happened in the studio when they decided to record English lyrics. Now, being the only Brazilian in the room who could speak English well, she was asked to try it. Untrained as a singer, Astrid had a particularly soft vulnerability to her voice, giving the recording a purity of innocence that perfectly matched the music and the lyrics. When Astrid and Joao's marriage broke up after this recording, she then had a relationship with Stan Getz. Pretty awkward. But nonetheless, the recording reached number 5 on the US Billboard charts, which was surprising given the current musical landscape. The piece begins with Joao singing the original Portuguese lyrics against his gentle classical strumming technique on the guitar. Also included is a stylistic bass line and some light brushwork on the drums. The drummer is playing brushes. Joao's voice is soft and it's gentle. And then around a minute and 20 seconds, Astrid is heard for the first time. She handles the lyrics and phrasing perfectly. Jobim is playing some minimalistic piano behind her singing, and then Getz makes his entrance at around 2.5 minutes. His playing is breathy, soulful, and measured. Later on, around 3 minutes and 50 seconds, Jobim plays a chorded piano solo in the instrument's higher register. Astrid then makes her return to sing the bridge, with Stan Getz filling in behind her. Overall, the track is incredibly relaxed and includes a vibe that exemplifies the bossa nova genre. The Girl from Ipanema. Enjoy. Alright guys, so before we go too much further, I am going to ask you to give me a little bit of a pass on some of the pronunciation of these Portuguese titles and some of the names as well. I'm trying my best. Track number 2 is Doralice, which is credited to Antonio Almeida and Dorival Caymmi. The track is sung in Portuguese by João Gilberto. It's one of only 2 songs not written by Jobim on this album. Stan Getz is again impressive during his solo, which begins at around a minute and 25 seconds. Alright, I'm gonna give this one a try. Para machucar meu coração. Now I'm sure my pronunciation is wrong, but there's nothing wrong with this piece. It's really quite beautiful. It was written by Brazilian composer Ari Barroso. The track is another characteristic bossa nova sung by Joao. At this point in the album, any English-speaking listener must feel the calm wash of the Brazilian stylings played by these fantastic musicians. Getz again fits in perfectly on his solo. Great music often takes you on a mental journey, and this is true of this song and the entire album. Please enjoy track number 3. Track number 4, the final track of side 1, is Desafinado. Desafinado is a Jobim vehicle noted for his characteristic use of advanced jazz harmonies, gorgeous melodies, and irregular song form. The tune is played slightly more up-tempo than the previous tracks, and it is considered a jazz standard. The word desafinado translates to out of tune. The song was recorded several times before this album. Stan Getz and Charlie Byrd recorded a version on the album Jazz Samba, which reached number 15 on the Billboard charts and was responsible for introducing bossa nova to a much broader audience. This version is also considered a classic album cut, Desafinado. Alright, so now it's time to flip the record and drop the needle on side 2. Track number 1 is another classic, the second most recognizable song from the record, Corcovado, Quiet Nights and Quiet Stars. Corcovado once again includes Astrid Giberto on vocals. She begins by singing the lyrics in English during a slow introduction with light piano accompaniment by Jobim. Getz and the rest of the band then entered, and Joao offers the Portuguese lyrics. Both Getz and Jobim solo on this track, and many notable artists have covered the song, including Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Oscar Peterson, Charlie Byrd, and many others. Corcovado, Quiet Nights, and Quiet Stars. Please enjoy. The next track is Sodenko Samba, which offers an increased tempo and was an attempt by Jobim to write a danceable bossa nova tune. But most people preferred to listen to bossa nova rather than to move to it. Sodenko Samba translates to jazz and samba. Getz enters at around a minute into the piece, and after playing in a similar style as he has been for most of the record, he does get slightly more exploratory towards the end of his improvisation. The track offers Getz's longest solo and some welcomed variety to the album. Track number 3 of side 2 is O Grande Amor. The song lightens the mood after Sodenko Samba, and the piece begins with Stan Getz playing lightly against the smooth backdrop. João Gilberto does not enter with the lyrics till about a minute and 10 seconds in, and then Stan Getz takes a second solo. Then Jobim solos, and he showcases his minimalistic piano technique, after which Stan Getz returns for a third solo. Rarely does this happen. Amor means love, and the song is undoubtedly lovely. Enjoy. The final track on the original LP is Vivo Sonhando, which translates to I Live Dreaming. Joao's vocal phrasing should be recognized throughout the album and on the track. You should have noticed now that it's quite different than most American vocal styles. And as expected, Stan Getz plays a fantastic solo on the record. It's a beautiful track that closes out a beautiful album. Alright guys, we did it. We made it to the end of the album and we are better for it. So it's time to lift the record off of the player, slip it back into the jacket. Maybe you want to put the dust cover back on and slide it back onto the shelf. In conclusion, Getz and Giberto is one of the most impactful bossa nova-based albums ever recorded. Stan Getz's playing is soulful throughout, and Jobim's writing is brilliant. It's one of the most relaxing albums you will ever hear, and yet it still offers a great deal of musical integrity, depth, and sophistication. I hope you enjoyed the album, Getz and Giberto. All right, once again, thanks for listening to the podcast. This was episode number 10, so we have like 890 more to go. Again, let's see how it goes. Spread the word if you like the podcast. I really enjoyed doing it. And if you've liked what you've heard and you want to learn more about the album or other albums featured on the cast, you can go to 30albumsfor30years.com, and you can also reach out on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Also, please check out my book, The History of American Music 1750 till 1950, an origin story, available from Kendall Hunt Publishers. Thanks again, and together, let's keep the music alive. All right, thanks for sticking around for the J Plays section, the bonus section of today's podcast. And for today, I decided to do a recording of Girl from Ipanema, which is a solo guitar version that I've done numerous times at various restaurants and weddings and background type situations. People really seem to enjoy it. I hope you do as well. Thanks again.